It is Wednesday, March 25th, and we are ready for history. We talked about the personal uh, aspect of President Arthur yesterday, and we talked about the fact that he is entering the White House without his wife. His wife died less than a year before he becomes president. And so he's coming not alone, though. Remember, I said he had a daughter coming with him, and then his sister does come for some of that time. But the person I picture is a little bit of a lonely person, I think. I think he's social and he likes going places, but I think um, at, with without his wife, I think we see a lonely person coming. Um, so here's some things going on. I've told you before that we're getting into a time period that is a lot's going on. There's a lot happening. Now, Arthur's presidency is not necessarily very active in like passing bills and laws. There's a few things that get done, which surprise everybody. But I've already explained to you yesterday that he was a little bit more of one of the laid back presidents, not as active. And let's get this. Let's do this. So we have a few important things, and then I'm going to tell you some things that are going on in the country so that you can get a really good idea of what time period we're talking about and what's going on and how the country is changing. That's what I want you to ask yourself every time we get to a new president. How is the country changing here? What's going on? Okay, so one of the things that he's most known for, his most important, they call it legislation, is that he passed the Pendleton Act, which is very interesting because remember I told you that Arthur was a result of the spoils system. He had been appointed to positions only because of the money he had and the fact that he would support certain politicians. And I told you that he was best friends, buddy with Roscoe Conkling. And so one of the first things Arthur does is pass the Pendleton Act, which shocks everybody because everyone's thinking, yay, the ones like Conkling who want power, they're like, yay, our guy's in. Everyone else is like, oh no, what is this guy going to do? He's going to completely destroy our country. And he shocks both sides by doing what no one expected and starting to clean that up. The system that he was in, he's cleaning it up. And so, a few things that this Pendleton Act does is it added exams for government jobs. Instead of me just coming up to you and saying, I'll give your campaign money if you put me in this job, and I say, oh, sure, I'll put you here. Instead of that, now you have to take an exam, a test that proves that you are fit for that job. It also created the Civil Service Commission, which is the commission that would be over all that and make sure that it was being done. We have lots of these commissions in our government, different types that oversee a certain area and make sure that it's happening in a certain way. It also banned the practice of demanding campaign money from federal employees. So let me explain just a little bit. Every president has to run a campaign, okay, to try to become president. It's going on right now. Every campaign needs money, okay? So think about that. If you, so the way this was working, the spoil system was a little bit backwards. If I put you in a high position, then you're going to give, then I start demanding money of you. I'm going to put you in this position and I'm going to give you this job, but you have to give so much money to my campaign, to me running again and becoming president again. Or sometimes it was senators or representatives, okay? So this banned that from happening. Sounds great, right? Okay, you can't force them to give money that way. They're not going to want that. They're not necessarily, they're not going to be linked anymore, okay? But here's the problem. Because they weren't getting money from those people that were in the federal jobs, those political campaigns still needed money. And who do you think saw this as an opportunity? The big businesses. We have Standard Oil Company at that time. We have these big companies that are like, I've got a lot of money. I can give some money to your campaign. Now, but what do you think's going to happen if they give money to their campaign? So, what bills are you going to pass that are going to help me? That bill really wouldn't be good for me, and I gave you a bunch of money. Do you think that's smart? Okay, so you're going to have big business that is making all of the money in the country having say in the government when the government should be controlling a lot of these other aspects. So you've got problems there. So remember, history is full of cause and effect. So great thing, we're cleaning up the government. We're trying to get rid of some of this corruption that a lot of it came in with Grant. But you also open the door for other things to come in. So you clean up one area of corruption, and guess what? You open up another door for what? More corruption. Do you know what that's called? Sin nature. If we can't do it one way, then we're going to find a way to do it another way. So we see that in history all the time. Okay, so that's one of the main things that legislation-wise that we see happening. Another one is there was a bill that came across for him to sign that was going to ban Chinese immigration for 20 years. Okay, so do you remember who were we with? It was Hayes, right? President Hayes, and he made a treaty with the Chinese. Remember, there was all those problems. Mainly with the Irish and the Chinese fighting because the Chinese were taking a lot of the jobs of the other immigrants. And so the country was like, let's just shut down and just say that the Chinese can't come because all these problems are coming because of them. Well, really, was it because of them specifically? No, it was other arguments that would happen with anybody. So they said, remember, they limited some immigration, but he worked out a treaty that Chinese were happy with and we were happy with too. So we worked that treaty out with them. So again, we see Congress wanting to ban the Chinese again, this time for 20 years. So he vetoes that. Go Arthur. He realizes that is not right. And so he vetoes it, but he does end up signing another act called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And this actually stopped Chinese immigration for 10 years. And it kept the Chinese that were already in the United States, it kept them from becoming American citizens. Guess what this did? It broke our treaty with China, didn't it? We already had a treaty with them. We already had an agreement. And here we come and say, sorry, change our minds. Okay, I want you to get in this idea. Just because it's the government doesn't mean it's always wrong. But just because it's the government doesn't mean it's always right either. We always need to look back at the past decisions and things that have happened and say, was this right? Yes or no? And then try to examine the effects of it and how we can, and what are some things maybe that are going on similar. So history always repeats itself. This act was actually renewed 2 times before it was repealed. Repealed means taken back. And so in 1943, this act was actually taken back and opened up immigration from China again. Okay, now here's some things going on in society. Okay, so what's going on? What's happening? What are some new things that are coming about? 1880, the hot dog. Okay, you have a sausage vendor in St. Louis, which was a city at the time, a bigger city. Remember, we still have cities. This is a weird time. We've got the train going out west. We've got the Wild West. We still have the Indians on reservations, mostly on reservations by this point. But we have some places, Chicago, St. Louis, New York, becoming pretty large cities. No cars, don't think of cars, but they did have some carts. So this guy has a sausage vendor cart in St. Louis, and at first he serves his sausages and he gives his customers white gloves so they don't mess up their hands. But his customers would walk off with his gloves and he kept losing his gloves and he couldn't buy or make that many gloves. And so he tried to come up with a different way. So he gets together with his brother-in-law, I believe, who has a bakery, and says, I want you to make some buns for my sausage. And so there you go. Now we have the hot dog. So what did I say before? What is the mother of invention? Necessity. When you need something, when you see a problem, that's when the best inventions are made, because you're like, this is a problem I need to solve. I need my gloves. I'm losing money. What can I do? We need to put them in something else. Maybe we can put them in something you can eat. Hey, how about bread? Amazing, huh? Okay, so 1883, Buffalo Bill began his Wild West show. And in doing this, he featured Indians and sharpshooters like Annie Oakley. I talked about Sitting Bull in one of the lectures a couple times ago. He became an act in this show. And Buffalo Bill had actually been a member of the Pony Express. He had been an Indian hunter. He had been a buffalo hunter. He had killed thousands of buffalo. And so he saw the opportunity in the East of making some money off of this. Look at all these experiences I've had. And you have all of these people out East who live in these cities that don't have any idea about what we're doing out here. So he started this show, and he started traveling around and making money featuring these people that lived or grew up out west. And think about how different the country was. And there are different parts of the country even now. We would probably be shocked to go to different parts and see how they did things. But at this time, think about the difference between this hot dog vendor in St. Louis, and the Indians out west, and the woman who lives on the prairie all by herself and has to depend on the train to bring her supplies. Completely different. So and there wasn't TV, there wasn't internet. They couldn't see the way each other's lives were very easily. If I want to know what life is like in China, it'll take me, a couple minutes with my internet, but it takes me just a little bit to get online and look up, see some pictures. You can go to Google Earth even. This is a cool thing for you to try this week. Go to Google Earth and pick anywhere in the world, and it'll kind of show you that area in the world. So our world right now is so small. We can find out things about people completely across the world instantly. It wasn't like that then. They didn't know what it was like in Kansas if they lived in New York. If you were getting ready to move out west and you were leaving your family, you pretty much said goodbye to them. And you knew you may not see them ever again for the rest of your life. You might exchange letters, but the letters would be weeks, months in coming. But you couldn't just pick up the telephone. You couldn't just get online and video chat like we can now. So there's another thing. Inventions come out of necessity. We need to be connected as people. So now we have all of these wonderful things that have made our world shrink, smaller. Okay, 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge in New York is completed. It was actually started in 1869. So we have a little less than 20 years that it's taking to complete this bridge. During the 1880s, we also have laws being passed to regulate child labor. Good for you, huh? So now you can sit at home and play your games, and there are laws that protect you from your parents sending you off to the coal mines. Okay? Before this, there wasn't. If the family needed money, the children didn't get an education, and the children were the ones that were helping their family. It was expected of them. But we're starting to see the beginning of what we call a progressive era where people are starting to look at how can we change and make our cities better, how can we make our lives better, how can we be good people. We also see 1883 time zones are established to help keep track of the trains. You had to have everyone had to be on the same time schedule. So I didn't realize this till a few years ago, but the whole reason we have time zones, we know that if I call my mom in Memphis right now, instead of 6, it's 5. And I know that. Um, but that wasn't the case until the trains. So there's another cause and effect. Why do we have time zones? Because of the train schedules. 1885, we have the first skyscraper home insurance company in Chicago, 10 whole stories. That was the first skyscraper. Do we have buildings taller than 10 stories now? Yeah, you better believe it. So look at all these different kinds of things. We've got a hot dog vendor in St. Louis. We've got Buffalo Bill. We have a bridge, huge, massive undertaking being built in New York. We've got we then we look into it and we're like, oh, child labor. So picture that. You've got children at this time going to work in factories all day. Maybe they're sitting at a sewing machine. Maybe they're children that's going into a coal mine. You also have that. You have people riding on trains. You've got people riding on trains to go out west and try to make a new life for themselves. You also have the very rich traveling on trains now. Well, you've got this life. During this time, we have a real separation of poor and rich. And we're going to see there's going to be a few people kind of soon come up that are really going to start focusing our eyes and being able to see the difference and what has happened. We're still pretty much in the Gilded Age. Remember, I told you it's called the Gilded Age because some people were becoming very, very, very rich and had lavish lifestyles. But there are some that are working in coal mines. There's some that have absolutely nothing and are living in poverty. Pretty amazing to think about how our world changes and what changes them. Okay, keep thinking about that. I want you to look at my list here. Okay, or pick an event on your in your book, maybe that I didn't talk about, and I want you to pick one that you believe is the most that brought about the most change. That brought it. Which one of these do you think changed things the most for the longest amount of time? Or you can tell us about a new event that you found in your book while you were researching. Keep it up, historians.